views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Coming up on this edition of Today's Verdict, when you place your loved one in a nursing home, you expect the best of care. But unfortunately, the mistakes that happen in a residential facility are many. What can you do to prevent malpractice from occurring? We will have a well-known trial attorney on set who specializes in nursing home dangers. Next up, our viewers have once again asked for an expert to guide us through the new rent regulations that should be followed by the city landlords, but sadly are not. So once again, we look at all things rent control and rent stabilize. Tenants, it's your time to be heard. As you can see, we have much to get to, so stay tuned. Today's Verdict starts right now. All right, well, hello and welcome to Today's Verdict, the live and interactive show that gives you your legal rights and options. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. Well, Today's Verdict is always encouraging you to stay connected. Make sure to tweet us at Today's Verdict and hashtag Today's Verdict if you have a question. Also, make sure to like us and follow us on Facebook at Today's Verdict and check us out at bronxnet.tv. Nursing homes can be dangerous. Not only can neglect lead to injury, but medical malpractice could even result in death. That is why we decided to bring on an expert to help our viewers protect their loved ones who are residing in a residential facility. We'll hear more about nursing homes and the lawsuits that become commonplace with medical malpractice attorney Andrew Targum. Andrew, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
Andrew, nursing homes, it seems like it's almost inevitable for many of us. Where do you even start? You get to a particular age and I guess you shop around, you try and look for a nursing home that seems to be qualified. I mean, you see so many of these cases now.
We're all getting older and the population's getting older and we all find ourselves with parents that are getting older, and sometimes the parents can take care of themselves, sometimes the parents need help or a little help from us, and sometimes the parents need a lot of help. So when it comes to nursing homes, the first thing you have to see is whether there's going to be short-term care or long-term care. And that's the first aspect of it.
So let's say you find the right home for you, or let's say you think you find the right home, and you put your loved one there. And what are the types of mistakes that seem to happen fairly quickly? You know, I mean, because there are so many things that can go wrong. What do you generally see?
Well, the first aspect of nursing homes are, does the person have the ability to handle their own affairs? So the first issue is, if somebody is going to go into a nursing home, do they have a power of attorney for one of their children or someone that can take care of their affairs and watch over them, a durable power of attorney? Because most of the population that goes into a nursing home, sometimes they develop memory problems, and sometimes that's very common with senior citizens that they might have to go to a special stepped-up type of nursing home where they have dementia care.
Do generally the relatives have the powers of attorney, or are these created once you really admit your loved one?
Well, you should do it before they get admitted.
You should, okay.
Because once they get admitted, that might become a whole different issue of having a guardian appointed. So once the person's in the nursing home, three common errors that we find are falls. Person can fall because they have balance issues. Person can fall because there are fall preventions that should be in effect that are not there.
Now, is there a particular rule that is supposed to be followed, with respect to the aides who are there or the nurses that are there? I mean, is there somebody supposed to be shadowing the loved one as they walk to the bathroom? How does it usually work?
Not necessarily. When a person goes into a nursing home, there has to be a plan of care. Plan of care might say the person's able to do all their daily living on their own. Other people might need assistance going to the bathroom. Some people might need assistance getting out of bed. So it all depends on their physical abilities once they enter that home, what the plan of care is.
And I'm sure they're plan of care changes over months or maybe even a year, depending on their own physical condition.
And that's why it's important to have a power of attorney when your loved one or a close relative or friend enters a nursing home, so that you are able to communicate with the doctors and the healthcare professionals in the nursing home. Otherwise, that person has no one to really talk to other than the person that's the resident.
So what we were talking about a little bit before we got on set was that there's a difference between negligence and medical malpractice. And not every issue in a nursing home is going to be malpractice. It could be negligence. Maybe you could tell the viewers what we mean by that.
Just so you understand, there are aspects of nursing homes that are governed by the public health law of the state of New York as well as federal guidelines. Those have to be adhered to specifically. Now, we only talked about one aspect, the fall issue, but bed sores are another very common source of bed sore or nursing home litigation. And what I mean by that is there are certain statutes that are involved that require a nursing home to be extremely vigilant when it comes to a patient with skin breakdown.
You know, why do we find more often than not that a common ailment in nursing homes are bed sores? Explain, what is a bed sore? What does it really mean?
A bed sore is a breakdown in the skin integrity. It's a skin ulceration. It starts off as a small pimple or a small rash or irritation that's just not looked at, watched, changed. And you got to understand that sometimes people in nursing homes are bedridden. They can't be moved, although they should be moved. So they're lying in the same position every day. Sometimes they're not toileted in a timely manner, and they're wearing diapers, and they're sitting in their own excrement and feces and urine, and that could cause skin breakdown very quickly.
Now this particular area, the bed sores, ulcers, is that the medical malpractice claim, or would that be necessarily a negligence claim?
It starts off as a negligence claim. The issue is the nurse's responsibility. And remember, David, as a trial attorney yourself, you know that medical malpractice, you need a medical expert to come in and say someone departed from good and accepted practice and that caused an injury, which is what it is. A negligence case, you don't need a medical expert. Here, when we're talking about a bed sore, it's a nursing situation. They're supposed to get the patient up out of bed. They're supposed to turn the patient. They're supposed to give special pillows or special mattresses to prevent bed sores, or heel pads or certain gels. And that's where we run into those loggerheads. And in my practice, in my firm, we usually allege both a departure in medical malpractice as well as nursing care. And we get experts in both fields.
Both fields. Let's talk medication.
Okay.
Because I think a big fear of many is that the loved one isn't getting the necessary medication or getting too much of a particular medication. Let's talk a little bit about it.
That's true, and that's the third aspect I was going to say is one of the very common actions that occur against nursing homes. Medication errors are not common, but they happen. Either the doctor calls in the medication to the nurse or the pharmacy who transcribes it wrong, either by dosage or the wrong medication, and that's given to the patient, and I've seen that, and or they just don't give the medication because, let's say, the patient is sitting in bed and they have dementia, and they put down a pill bottle and walk away, and the person doesn't take the pill, they throw it out, and then they don't take their medication.
Now, medical malpractice or negligence came there?
Well, it depends. In the issue where the medicine was transcribed wrong, the doctor did his job. It was the nurse and physician's assistant that gave the wrong dosage. That becomes negligence. Whereas another situation where a patient might be malnourished or not getting enough food, that's a nursing issue also. That becomes a situation.
Now, you try these cases all the time.
Yes.
Do you feel that the jurors have a real sympathy to let's say, as opposed to like an automobile accident case maybe, but are jurors sympathetic to what seems to be happening in the nursing homes?
I think everybody's sympathetic. Everybody has a parent or a loved one that they care about. And when it comes to nursing homes, it's like giving them your own child. You're asking them to take care of your parent because you are putting your faith in them that they are going to treat them as good as you are. Now, sometimes, and this is why people have to be vigilant, I've had clients go to nursing homes where the person's all bundled up, swaddled like a baby from head to toe. Underneath that swaddling are huge bed sores, down to the bone. Now, when we talk about bed sores, we only talked about stage 1, which could be a pimple or a skin irritation. If they're not treated, they eat their way down the muscle and all the layers down to the bone, and that becomes life-threatening.
And I mentioned that when we introduced you, that unfortunately, some of these actions or inactions from the staff can result in death. Have you seen that?
I've seen that. I've seen where it's resulted in loss of limbs. That's very common in my practice that we see that. I've seen it where the person passes away as a result, and I've also seen that the fact that they don't treat these medical conditions in an emergency fashion, and you don't know why they're not doing that. Person should be sent to the hospital.
So what do you do as the loved one? How do you make sure that you're not getting the sores or that your loved one is being taken care of? Like, what would you do?
Okay, first of all, when you go visit your relative, and hopefully you're visiting, or your loved one, and you visit them on a frequent basis, you have a scan of that person. How are you feeling? Are you out of bed? Are they laying around? Are they depressed? Remember, there are psychological issues here. Some people that are in nursing homes don't understand why they're there. They start to suffer dementia, they start to suffer spatial anomalies where they can't keep track of time because they're not outside as much. They're not doing anything. So you have to make sure their mind is okay. The other issue is, are you looking at their body? Are you talking to the people taking care of them? How are they today? Do they eat? Do they do this? Do they do that? Remember, malnutrition can lead to bed sores. If they don't get enough protein and not enough liquids, the body can't heal, the body can't do things. So everything runs hand in hand. You have to find out what's going on with intake, with activities, with everything.
So you have to be really proactive.
You have to be proactive. You
right.
can't just put them there and house them.
Most importantly, where do we find you?
Where do you find me? We are at tnblawny.com. We are also at 212-349-2727.
Right.
We're in all 5 boroughs and all the outer counties in New York.
And you'll come back on.
I hope to.
All right.
Thank you so much.
We have to take a quick break, but don't worry, we'll be back with more Today's Verdict right after this.
How can I help my daughter with her reading?
Searching for help with Dachshund reading.
No.
Let me try. Sarah's bright, but when she's reading, she has trouble sounding out words.
Playing world music.
What?
I give up.
Wait, I was trying to show you how Sarah feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
All right, welcome back to Today's Verdict. I'm your host, David Lesch. We are always encouraging you to stay connected. Tweet us at Today's Verdict. New York has rent regulations to ensure affordability of housing by limiting the rent that a landlord may charge. But what exactly are the guidelines and how do you know if you are covered? We'll learn more with attorney Justin Brash. By the way, Justin, you're not just an attorney, you're also a councilman in Westchester. You wear a lot of different hats.
Yes, I'm a councilman in the city of White Plains and a landlord, tenant, and leasing lawyer in the city.
Listen, this is a particular area. The viewers constantly write in about rent control and rent stabilize, and so it's one of the reasons we're having you on here. Where do you even start in terms of rent control, rent stabilization? Maybe you could break it down a little bit for us.
Well, these are two systems that were created. Initially, rent control was created after World War II as all the soldiers were coming back and they were going to flood the city. So they had to figure out a way to keep the rents down and keep things affordable and keep things sane so the prices wouldn't go out and everyone would be thrown out of their homes. That system was the older and more original system. There are only somewhere in tens of thousands of people under rent control today, the older system. In 1971, they switched to rent stabilization.
So rent stabilization is really what we're talking about more often than not.
Right. They're like 900,000 either people or, I think there are 900,000 units. I don't know if there's people or units, but close to 1 million of either people or units are covered by rent stabilization in New York City right now. Okay. So
everybody thinks, you have a rent stabilized apartment, you hit the jackpot. If you leave, you can give it to your friend, you can give it to your relative. Doesn't work that way. Right?
Right.
So talk a little bit about what's commonly known as succession, right? Because that's really what we're talking about.
So I'll tell you how I got into this business. I got into it because of succession rights. When I graduated from college, I was pretty smart. I moved in with my grandfather. And I lived with my grandfather from 97 to 101 years old. I really lived with him on the Upper West Side. And I had lived, if a grandchild and a grandson, a grandfather and a grandson are considered immediate family, I have the right to succeed to his apartment if I lived there with him for more than 2 years. So I lived with him for 4 years, and it should have been no issue and the easiest thing in the world. Some young foreign lawyer bought the rights to this co-op that my grandfather didn't own, and he proceeded to sue me after my grandfather moved into a nursing home and to try to evict me.
Speaking of nursing homes, we just had somebody on set who was discussing what happens if you put a loved one in a nursing home.
Right. So if you put a loved one in a nursing home, you want to protect whoever's in the apartment.
Exactly.
And I actually had a case like that where somebody put somebody in the nursing home and they messed up the rent regulations because they didn't inform the landlord that the elderly person had left. And that became a very contentious issue. So it's important to meet with a lawyer and understand that it's almost like estate planning, passing these apartments on. So back to my story, I moved in with my grandfather. I lived with him for 4 years, and I had a lawyer, and we spent 10 years in litigation. And ultimately, I was offered a buyout, and I was offered to purchase it, and there were a lot of different options. And in the end, I purchased it at a steep discount. But I was really entitled to the succession rights. And the reason I went into this business was to protect and help tenants. My lawyer was not strong enough and was not effective enough in fighting with the landlord. And that's why this case that should have taken 1 year, maybe two, took 10 years.
What are the loopholes that the landlord seems to use to grab that apartment back and put it on a market rate? Like, how do they? Do they use a video camera outside to see who comes and goes? Like, what's their MO?
They use any trick they can. They certainly hire investigators to figure out who's living in the apartment. They can actually put a camera right in front of your apartment, and certainly they can put a camera in the hallways. So they're trying to see who's using that apartment as their primary residence. And they don't even need to start a lawsuit. They don't even need a tremendous amount of evidence. They just need a little evidence that you're not using the apartment as your primary residence. Primary residence is defined as where you actually live. You spend 183 nights a year or more in the apartment. So if they get a little hook, they see that you spend time at a place in Florida for a few months, they'll often bring, even though you're allowed to do that, they'll bring a lawsuit against you and drown you in legal costs and litigation so that they can try to get the apartment back.
How do you even begin in terms of preventing them from doing something like this? Do you constantly send them letters to letting them know that you're staying? If you go on vacation, let them know that you're only going to be there for a week? Like, what do you do to be proactive before giving the landlord, giving him even a chance or her a chance to start one of these eviction
The
actions?
most important thing is to actually meet with a lawyer and make a plan, because too many people try on their own. And you need to make sure all of your documentation is at the apartment, because sometimes people will get an apartment in Florida and they'll only spend 3 months a year there, which is completely legal. But then they'll start to move their driver's license and they'll start to move their taxes, and this all becomes things that indicate you don't really live there as your primary residence. And suddenly the landlord there, they've got their hook. You're not paying your taxes out of your apartment. You're not using it as your primary residence. We're going to sue you. We're going to try to take it back. And the problem is not so much that you need to prove then that it's your apartment, and they can make you spend tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees.
So the burden switches to you if that happens.
Correct.
And that's really difficult. Let's talk luxury apartments. So many luxury apartments now that are being built around the city. How does that work in terms of rent stabilization? Some of them have to be saved for a certain amount of people?
Most of those buildings are not rent regulated.
They're not.
If the owner gets certain tax breaks, they can be put under the rent stabilization system, meaning the increases on the rent are kept at the level for rent stabilized increases. But you can have an apartment that has a $6,000 rent, and because the landlord got one of these tax breaks, they can't raise the rent as long as the landlord's getting the tax break at normal rates.
Are there particular professions that are afforded a better opportunity to either stay in a rent stabilized apartment or be able to be given a particular apartment, whether you're a city worker? I see this sometimes in the news, but does that really, it doesn't make a difference.
It doesn't make a difference.
Some people seem to suggest, well, I work for the city, I deserve this particular apartment, or I get priority, but it doesn't work that way.
No. And another thing we were just talking about is there is something called luxury decontrol.
What does that
If you earn more than $250,000 a year and your rent goes over $2,700 a month, which happens to a lot of apartments in Brooklyn on the Upper West Side, the landlord can deregulate your
But
apartment.
how do they even find out about that?
They're allowed to go to the tax authorities and find out what your income is.
But you don't have to give them an authorization releasing your tax
Well,
record?
you fill out, they send you an affidavit of statements, and they have the right not to see your income, but to see whether you're over the threshold. And this leads to the next thing. At this point, a lot of times landlords try to buy out tenants, and that's another area where a lawyer like myself can help
Okay,
you.
so let's say that happens. Right? I have a rent-stabilized apartment. I've been living there since college for 10 years. I'm loving it, but I may want to get married. I'm going to move out, need a bigger place. How does the negotiations work? I ring. Hi, I'd like to maybe give you the chance to take the apartment. What are you going to offer me? How does it really work there?
Well, the way it really works is that you need a skilled professional to help you, because if you just call up, they'll offer you $5,000 or $10,000 and try to take your apartment back, and they'll bluff you, to tell you the truth. They'll say, "What are we? Clearly you're leaving the apartment. That's why you're calling us." They're very smart, so they will often not offer.
Well, let me ask you a question. What's the going rate? How does it? What do you determine really in terms of what the value it is to your client to leave? Like,
Right,
how do you
well,
make that? How do you make that determination?
A lot depends on the situation. If it's a rental apartment and the landlord can renovate it and rent it, let's say for triple the amount of rent, you'll often get 2 or 3 years worth of rent. But sometimes it's a condominium or a co-op. So you're a tenant and you're rent stabilized and you're paying $1,500 a month. But the landlord can sell this apartment for $600,000 to $6 million. So suddenly you have them in a situation where this condominium or co-op can be sold for a lot of money. And if you hire an experienced lawyer, you can really do much better in those negotiations.
So we're in a democratic city, basically, as opposed to Republican. Does it look like more is being done than in terms of trying to create affordable housing for either your constituents or just people throughout the city, or is the city just getting richer and richer and the poor people unfortunately being pushed out to the outer boroughs and beyond? I mean, how do you see it?
In general, it's very hard to create affordable housing. I can speak more so from the perspective of White Plains, which has the same problem as New York City. Land is very expensive. And in the city of White Plains, what we do is we mandate that if you build a multiple dwelling in the city of White Plains, you have to have 10%, soon to be extended to 12% affordable housing at a reduced level from the market rate. In New York City, they're trying things like that, and they're also trying what's called 80-20, which is where they give these breaks to landlords, and they have 20% of the apartments are at a reduced rate.
Okay, listen, you also do landlord-tenant work, all right?
Let's
talk a little bit about some of the things that you see more often in your practice than not. Are you finding illegal lockouts? Are you seeing just bogus evictions? What are you really seeing more often than not?
You see a lot of these cases that I was talking about in New York City. Landlords are very desperately trying to take back these apartments. The amount of money they can make if they can show that a tenant doesn't use an apartment and it's not their primary residence, the succession rights from, as I said, an immediate family to an immediate family are not done properly. They can make a tremendous amount of money on that apartment.
When you try these cases or you get involved in these cases, is this a jury trial? Is this with a judge? How does this generally work?
It's usually a bench trial, but the process is what makes it so advantageous for the landlord. First, you go to court a couple of times. Then the landlord takes discovery. They insist on getting all of your documents about you. Credit card reports, bank reports, cable bills, taxes, all of that. And that takes a lot of time and energy to accumulate all that document, to produce it to
But at
them
least you get to
properly.
stay in the meantime.
In the meantime, you certainly
But
get
you
to
stayed
stay.
10 years.
Well, I could have stayed longer.
All right.
And I've helped many other people stay longer. So, and then after that, they take your deposition. So you have to prepare for the deposition, and it just takes a lot of time and energy and money.
It's by the way, just so I don't want to run out of time with you, absolutely. Where do we find you? Because someone's going to want to reach out.
You can definitely go to my website, brashlegal.com, BRASCHLEGAL.com, or my phone number is 212-267-2500.
All right, not much time. Tips. Somebody's watching right now. They think that a landlord's building a case against them. They see some video cameras around. People in the building are talking, that the landlord's asking them questions, whether you're coming and going. What would you give as advice?
Or if you just want your grandchild to take over your rent-regulated apartment, I advise everybody to come in for a consultation. Right. Everyone should come in. It's like estate planning. If you want to pass that, if you want to hold on to that apartment,
and give it to a loved
or
one.
if you want to hold on to it for yourself or give it on to a loved one, you need to meet with a specialist so you can plan for it. And you can often save a fortune because often it's 1 or 2 quick meetings instead of years of litigation.
I mean, I've heard some of these succession rights, or when they buy you out, they can give you almost hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes.
Absolutely. Tenants can get hundreds of thousands of dollars
because that's what the market rate would be if over a course of time. Well, Justin, thank you very much. You're going to come back on one time, right?
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Thanks so much.
It was absolutely a pleasure. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank both of our guests for joining us, and of course you, the viewers, for watching. If you missed any part of today's show, be sure to check it out at www.bronxnet.tv. Also remember, if there's a legal issue or topic you'd like on a future edition of Today's Verdict, just feel free to contact me at David Lesch at bronxnet.org or tweet us at Today's Verdict, and make sure to hashtag Today's Verdict for myself and all of us. Always remember, know your rights, know your issues, reach a verdict. See you in 2 weeks.